Welcome to the Kackbrat Chronicles.
Okay, Mr. Mark Kemp, the Yorkshire Fossil Hunter. Welcome to the Kackbrat Chronicles.
Thanks for having me.
So today we'll be going down a proper rabbit hole in terms of fossils, which you are a pro at finding and working with. So just tell me, Mark, so you are known as the Yorkshire Fossil Hunter. There we go. What's your background? How did you get into fossils?
So my background isn't fossils. My background is construction, engineering. From leaving school, I started off working in construction, and I moved into engineering. I've always been interested in natural history. From being a young boy, I've always enjoyed digging up the past and researching it. I find it quite exciting. So I've always had hobbies in and around fossil hunting, metal detecting, all them sort of things. And then, I decided to start focusing on fossils, especially fossils of the Yorkshire coast. I found it really, really fascinating that you could go on the beach and you could come home with a bag full of rocks, and some of them were hundreds of millions of years old. So a couple of years ago, well, about 10 years ago, I took it a lot more serious, where I was going out 2 or 3 times a week. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, I took it on myself to do it as a profession, so full-time fossil hunting and preparating and guided walks and stuff like that. So my background is construction and engineering, which has served me well.
Yeah, it's not that far from it's not that far away from digging in the ground and picking up rocks, I guess.
It's hard work. It's lifting every object, and and to be fair, the engineering's come in handy, because I make my own equipment, for cutting and polishing my fossils. So I've made my own flat laps and saws and stuff like that. So it has served me well.
Tell me, the areas are you based in Hull?
Yeah, so I'm based in Hull, yeah.
Okay, and then your area of expertise is obviously the Yorkshire coastline. From where does that go? From where to where?
So I like to separate the Yorkshire coast into 3 areas. We've got the Holderness coast, which is Spen Point all the way to around Flamborough, around Bridlin and that sort of area. And it's all pretty much boulder clay in the south and goes up to chalk in the north. And then we've got from Flamborough to Robin Hood's Bay area. I like to call that the dinosaur coast, around Scarborough, that sort of area. And then everywhere north of Ravenscar up to like Whitby, even like as far as Redcar, that's all like a deep sea environment territory. So that's where you get, your really good ammonites and stuff like that. So from Redcar all the way down to Spen Point, full Yorkshire coast is all fossil ferrous.
And that's mainly, you get obviously the sea and you get beach, and then you get these cliffs that are on the side, where all the fossils come from. They break out of these cliffs.
Yeah. The Yorkshire coast has got so it's all the cliffs. What you're talking about is all Jurassic in age. We've got Lower Jurassic, Middle Jurassic, and Upper Jurassic. There's a little bit of Cretaceous in there, but the majority of the rocks were formed during the Jurassic era, hundreds of millions of years ago. It's all pretty much deep sea environment, shallow sea environment. So over millions of years, all that sediment from the sea has created the rocks that we see now on the beach. And exactly like you said, through erosion and through the tide coming in, the cliffs release the fossils.
I think before we get into sort of how you find them or what you do with them, can you explain to me just what a fossil is? Because I think there's so many different types, and obviously, the ages of these things differ quite a bit. So what exactly is a fossil?
So it's a good question. A fossil in my head is it's evidence of ancient life, whether it be a plant fossil, whether it be an ammonite or a marine reptile. It's given us evidence that there was ancient life millions and millions of years ago. You get such things as trace fossils, so that's not actually an animal, but you must have seen dinosaur footprints on land and stuff like that. That's a fossil. They're trace fossils. They shows exactly where the dinosaurs were, and they give us a bit of a story how they lived and stuff like that. So yeah, a fossil is evidence of ancient life.
And because the makeup of these fossils, you obviously get, if you get land mammals and stuff, you get bones, you get bone fragments or a piece of bone or whatever. But I found with, I think, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but a bellum, is it a belemnite?
Belemnite, yeah.
They like little octopus looking things.
Similar, they're sort of squid-like creatures. So the belemnite is the full creature. And we often find the rostrum of the belemnite, which is the hard sort of skeleton inside. So yeah, the belemites. I mean, some of the belemites are absolutely huge as well. So if you think like Moby Dick with a giant squid, we've got 10, 12 foot squid-like creatures roaming around on the Yorkshire coast a couple of 100 million years ago.
But what is that fossil made of then? Because I've picked up a few of them. It basically looks like the front piece of a bullet. It's like a sort of round thing. But what's that made of? Because it almost looks like a piece of glass. It's sort of like a funny. It doesn't look like a bone.
So how I often explain this is it's actually a process called permineralization. And do you know what stalagmites are?
Yeah.
So the groundwater seeps down, and over millions of years, the minerals inside the groundwater turns into rock. That's basically what's happening with a fossil. The fossil will die, it'll sink to the seafloor, it'll be covered in sediment, and then over millions of years, the exoskeleton, the hard parts, they'll degrade away, and they'll leave a cast inside the sediment. And then over millions of years again, the groundwater will seep into that open cast and fill it with various types of minerals, which then creates the fossil. So there could be calcite, there could be pyrite. There's loads of different types of preservation in fossils, but it's basically through groundwater seeping into the void left behind by the creature.
Okay, so it's not. See, this is the interesting part for me, because it's almost like the memory of the animal. It's not physically the animal.
It's not physically the animal. No, it's a 3D cast of what was once there. But some of the detail we get is absolutely amazing. I mean, there's even like microbe fossils, which shows like the cell walls of plant fossils. We can even go to that sort of microscopic detail. So it's basically like a mirror cast of what was once there.
And then with the other stuff we get, like the ammonites, we get quite a lot of here on the coast. Is that because obviously that's now the ammonite fossils we get, that's the shell of the animal? Yeah,
so the exoskeleton of the ammonite, the hard body parts are much better at being preserved as a fossil than the soft body parts. Although we do get soft body part fossils, are just extremely rare. So the shell of an ammonite is very, very hard, which means it's more likely to survive fossilization.
Okay, and then now another sort of very interesting part for me about the fossils we find here on the coastline is they don't come from here, if I'm correct. They were brought here with glaciers, obviously not 10 years ago. If you can just explain how the fossils actually got here.
Yeah, so when you're talking about glaciers, that's solely aimed at the Holderness coast. So you must have been along the Holderness coast, Mappleton and places like that, and it's all soft boulder clays. The cliffs are all full of clay. So during the last ice age, if you can imagine the big ice sheet was heading southwards, obviously from the North Pole, and these ice sheets were absolutely huge. Anything what got in the way, they just basically picked it up and dragged it along with them. when the ice sheet thawed out, when it was retracting, all of these big boulders, all this clay, fossils, rocks, they got left behind. So on the Holderness coast, it's like a big dump from the last ice age, and so all the rocks and all the clay was deposited behind. Slightly different when you go up further north. That's more in situ. That's more a geological formation. But the Holderness coast is purely glacial erratics.
So the fossils that we get on the coastline here, are they the same ones that you find a bit more inland, or is it a different type of thing altogether?
There is sites where you can go inland, and if you dig down to the Jurassic, where in geological terms, you will get the same sort of ammonites as what you find on the coast. The reason we find more on the coast is because it's a fresh exposure and it's constantly getting eroded. But if you went a mile inland and you dug down into the Jurassic, you're going to find the same sort of fossils. There is inland quarries where we get sort of different time zones within the Jurassic, even like the Cretaceous, where you'll get different sort of species. There's a famous site in Scunthorpe, which is now closed, and there's some really well famous ammonites from there. What we don't get on the Yorkshire coast, but we get on the Devon coast. So yeah.
Okay. And with the fossils that we get here, are they mainly marine animals? It's animals that died while they were underwater.
Yeah, so pretty much every fossil I found on the Yorkshire coast, barring, let's say 99% of the fossils I found are marine environment. So ammonites, marine reptile, belemnites, coral, crinoid, all them sort of things. They all lived in a marine environment. We do get on the Holderness coast ice age material, so we'll get. You can see this big tusk behind me. That's off a woolly mammoth. There's a tooth up there as well. So we do get land mammals, fossils from that sort of era. There has been a couple of dinosaur bones found on the Yorkshire coast. So I don't know exactly how they ended up in a marine deposit. There could have been more like in Scarborough, there's a bit of a river formation. So they would have been on the side of the river and died, and over millions of years of fossilised. But they're extremely rare dinosaur fossils.
Okay, so what's the stuff that we find on the coastline here? Is there a massive? Because obviously we're talking about millions of years ago. Is there? What's the time? The range in years of these things? Are they all within like a million years of each other, or is there like a 50 or 100 million year difference?
So when we're talking about the Jurassic age fossils, which is predominantly what we got on the Yorkshire coast, from lower to upper, you've got 145 to 163 million years. No, sorry, let me repeat that. The lower Jurassic is 174 to 201 million years. The middle Jurassic is 163 to 174, and the upper Jurassic is 145 to 163 million years. So from 201 to 145 million years is the Jurassic era, and that's pretty much from North to South Yorkshire is them sort of timescales. There is a little bit of Cretaceous, which is slightly younger, and then obviously the Holderness coast is a mystery. We'll get stuff from all over.
That for me is mind blowing, because I always feel like it's very difficult to understand how long a million years is in actuality, and it's.
I deal with fossils what are millions of years old all the time, and even I can't get in my head how old they are. I always say I think millionaires will probably grasp it a lot better than we will.
Yeah, but it is because it's we're talking about. I mean, the age gap between stuff that's 200 million years old and 150 million years old. There's 50 million years just in between the two, and then another 100 million years till we find them. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of time. It's amazing.
And in geological terms, it's nothing. The first fossils in the fossil record are 4.1 billion years old. So yeah, exactly. So 200 million years old for a little ammonite on Yorkshire coast is nothing in the grand scale of the fossil record.
So with this, let's say 50 million year gap between the first, let's just take ammonites. I don't know, have you got an ammonite there close to you that you could just show to the screen so people can see what an ammonite actually is?
So this is a really, really standard ammonite. This is a Dactylioceras semicollatum. There's plenty of these found on the Yorkshire coast.
Okay, so people just listening, it's basically just a spiral, which is the shell of the animal, just a spiral shell, basically as big as the palm of your hand.
Yeah, there would have been a living body chamber, like the last third of the outer whale, where the creature would have lived. The rest of these were filled with chambers and gases or liquids. There was a siphuncle tube which it used to release gas, so it could actually create its own buoyancy within the water levels. So there was quite clever, and they lived for a very long time. They lived longer than the dinosaurs, much longer. So as a species, there was very, very successful.
So can you, in that, let's just call it 50 million years, from the first ammonites we found till the last ones or whatever, just in that 50 million year gap, can you see changes in those animals from sort of like evolutionary changes or anything in those 50 million years?
Yeah, that is the main reason why we can identify different sort of species is the difference in the size, ribs. Some created spines. The early ammonites were often like gonatites and sort of stuff, where they was very simple looking. They had a very plain shell, very plain suture patterns, and then through evolution, through millions and millions of years, the shells got a lot more intricate. The sutures got a lot more intricate. I mean, some of the fossils are almost like a piece of art, towards the end of the Jurassic, early Cretaceous. Some of them were absolutely beautiful with horns and different various spines and stuff like that. I think there's actually one here. So just for an example of a spiny ammonite.
Okay, so it looks the same as, just for people that are obviously just listening, it's got the same spiral form, but it's got these spikes all on the outside. What would that have been for, like a protective thing to ward off stuff that wants to eat it?
I think so, personally. It's not 100% as in anything in science. It's just a theory, but it's a pretty sensible theory that if someone wants to defend itself, it's going to create spans. If there's an ichthyosaur swimming past, he won't want to have a chomp of that, would he? It'd get, it'd hurt him.
And then do we get the same sort of changes in the other fossils that we see? The same evolutionary changes across the board, where stuff gets more spiky and maybe a change in size?
Yeah, I think so. So the marine reptiles, your ichthyosaurs, your crocodiles, your plesiosaurs, over the fossil record, the fossils that they've found and prepared, they've got a lot bigger teeth and stuff like that, a lot more predatory, even like bigger flippers, more streamlined body shapes. So yeah, I think through evolution, every species has sort of excelled from generation to generation. Talking over thousands, millions of years. So yeah, there's a clear record of all the species we find getting smarter, basically, which is quite fascinating in itself.
So if you go take a walk along the beach here, you find some of them. You find in massive boulders, you'll see some little things sticking out. Other ones you find in like almost like, I don't want to say sheet rock, but like big flat pieces of rock. And then some of them you get in these little, you just see the little riff. It's like a rock as big as my hand, like a round sort of circular rock, and then with something in it. Did these things all they obviously died, and then, as you said, they went to the bottom of the ocean, and all of the fossilization happened. When the glaciers came in, did they bring like big sheets of these things, and they got broken down along the way? Or how did it happen that some of them are in these slabs and some of them are loose little rocks?
Yeah. So I think what you're describing there with the slabs was that when you was at Whitby Way by any chance?
That was at Mapleton.
All
I think
right.
we went to Mapleton.
So normally with the big shale slabs, that's part of the Whitby mudstones, the Allen members up Whitby Way, and the shale it's not impossible to see it on the Holderness coast because the glacial sheet could have dragged it down from Whitby. So yeah, the big grey shale slabs, you've got to look at them like a book, and every single layer is a point in history of the seafloor. That's all the sediment. It's basically all that sort of stuff. And the nodules are inside the grey shales, and the nodules are where the ammonites are better preserved. You still get fossils in the grey shales, but they tend to be quite squashed. Did you see any flat squashed ammonites when you was there?
We found obviously we didn't have any tools with us, so the only stuff we found was the stuff that we could physically see. So we picked up, I think most of the ammonites we picked up were loose, like it's just the ammonite. I didn't have to take any rock out of it or take it out of a rock. We found 1 or 2 clumps, like a rock with like 5 or 6 little ammonites sticking out of it. And then there was some of the bigger rocks that were obviously broken out of the cliff wall. You could see here and there. There's like those sheets that I told you about. Now you could see sort of here and there something sticking out. So that was basically the variety of ammonite sort of deposits that we saw.
So the majority of the fossils you find, they will be surrounded by the host rock, and it's often the host rock what tells us where roughly in the geological timescale the ammonite comes from, because we know through the microfossils and the sediment and stuff like that, roughly, even like the colour of the rock, you know, there's certain colours where I can look at and say that's from there, you know. It's quite... As a fossil hunter, if I find a fossil without any host rock on it, it's sometimes a little bit stumping because you sort of go hand in hand with, the identification. So yeah, really, both sides of the fossil and the host rock tell us a story.
Okay, so between the time that these animals died and turned into fossils, and how can I ask this now? When did the glaciers bring them down, and when did the animals actually turn into fossils?
Yeah, I think you're getting confused with the glaciers. The glaciers is only subject to the Holderness coast.
Okay.
The rocks up north, up Whitby, Scarborough, they was already there. The glacial sheets just glided on top of them all, basically. They would have picked some of the rocks up from up north and deposited them on the Holderness coast.
Okay.
So yeah, these fossils would have been long fossilised when the glacial sheets came on top. The glacial sheets was 30 to 50,000 years ago during the last ice age. So like a blink of an eye, basically. Yeah. The fossils were long dead, long fossilised, millions of years before that.
Yeah, it really is. I'm working on another episode, and there's a piece of it going about the Egyptians, and I think it's the same sort of struggle because we can't interpret that amount of time. I mean, I can understand what 100 years ago is, and 200 years, but going back 200 million years, I don't think I understand that fully. It's so long ago that you just it's just weird. I wanna there's obviously not just fossils that we found on the coast here. There's other stuff, like I know we found a piece of that fool's gold, stuff like that. Was that also brought down from up north, or was that from here?
So I think the majority of the fool's gold we found is up north, but there will be some pockets of it at the North Sea. So fool's gold's quite interesting in itself. It's pyrite, as you know. And I remember reading one time, fool's gold is actually an indicator of extinction level events, because with the oxygen decreasing, fool's gold was a lot more prominent in the Earth's crust, so to speak. It formed much more easily when there was extinction level events going on. So when we find pyrite, we know basically the ammonites, the dinosaurs, etc., were dying off.
What's interesting for me about that fool's gold is we found some ammonites that looked the same as those nodules, or whatever you call it, those pieces of fool's gold. Are they made up of the same stuff then?
Yeah, so you can get part of the permineralization processes. Some of the fossils can be preserved in pyrite. So I mean, we get a few up Yorkshire, but you must have heard of the pyrite ammonites down Dorset way on Charmouth Beach, and they get perfectly golden ammonites. They're just 100% pyrite. They're absolutely stunning. But we do get a lot of pyrite up north. Just it's generally not as shiny, as nice as down south.
So basically, what the fossil looks like when we finally get it, it all depends on the environment that it was fossilized in.
Massively depends on the environment. It also massively depends on how quickly the specimen was covered. If it was left on the sea floor for a couple of weeks, you've got to imagine there'd have been predators scavenging on it. There would have been high energy environments rolling it around, and bits would have broken off. So if you think a complete ichthyosaur died and went straight to the sea floor and was covered in sediment instantly in like a high energy environment, there's much more chance of that full ichthyosaur being preserved than if it had been rolling around for a couple of weeks and other creatures would have been nabbing at it.
I also see on these fossil groups that I've joined on Facebook, I see people find a lot of shark teeth as well. Are they from the same sort of movement, or are they just sort of stuff that come in from turbulent seas?
Yeah, so I saw your question about shark's teeth, and unfortunately, we don't really get many on the Yorkshire coast. So I can't really talk too much about shark teeth. I'm not really aware about them. I know they get some in Hen Bay down in Kemp. It's really productive from down that way. And I think lower down on the Norfolk coast, they get a few shark's teeth, and maybe around the Isle of Sheppey and stuff like that. But it's not something I've never found a shark's tooth.
Okay. So what is the? Let's do this. What's the rarest fossil that you can get here, or that you found here, in your opinion?
That's a good question, because I'm glad you said in my opinion. I mean, there's some really, really rare ammonites. People talk about marine reptile being like the mecca for fossil hunters, an ichthyosaur or a plesiosaur. And don't get me wrong, they're absolutely brilliant. And I've got some really nice examples of marine reptile. There's literally thousands of them being found now, from hundreds of years ago to even modern day, that they're still getting found. So, yeah.
Do they look, is that like a lizard looking thing, or what do they look like?
Ichthyosaur, the marine reptiles are like a dolphin, basically, with teeth, big teeth, yeah. So they're like sort of what people strive for on the Yorkshire coast, but I'd much rather find a nice rare ammonite. So one of the ammonites I've got in my collection is a Ankyloceras sensu. Try saying that when you're drunk. It's basically it's from the Cretaceous era, so it's younger than the Jurassic, and it's an uncoiled heteromorph. So it's not like what I've just shown you, like a spiral ammonite. It's literally uncoiled, like a trumpet shape, sort of. I mean, I've got it here next to me to show you. So that is an ammonite, believe it or not.
Bloody hell, it's massive.
Yeah. So the body chamber was quite short. There would have been a little bit on top of here what returned back, but this is one of the only ones of its kind found on the Yorkshire coast in hundreds and hundreds of years. There's been a few fragments found, but nothing as complete. They get a lot of these on the Isle of Wight down south, but for Yorkshire, this is a pretty rare specimen.
Okay, so yeah, for people just listening, it basically looks like a smoking pipe almost. Is that still in the same family? I mean, that's still an ammonite, or is it something different?
Yeah, it's just slightly more evolved, and it's from a slightly different time zone. So it's from the Cretaceous period, but yeah, it's still in all purposes, it's still an ammonite.
Okay, and then we found. Okay, so we went to Mapleton twice. So Mapleton is a little town, yeah, not far from Otteringham where we are. And went there one day because someone told us there's a shitload of fossils to be found there. Had absolutely no idea what to look for. We Googled a few pictures and we saw the ammonites and stuff. And went there and we found nothing, mainly because we had no idea what to look for. Came back very disappointed. And then we did a bit more research and also looked at the tides, because it's very easy to get caught in that little piece of coastline by Mapleton. So we went when it was low tide and basically spent the whole day there. And we found mostly ammonites, and there was a little shell thing. One of the people there told me they call it a devil's toenail. We found a lot of them. We've actually found some of them on the farm here. Would you say the ammonites and those devil's toenails, are they the most commonly found fossils around here?
Yeah, especially on the Holderness coast. So the devil's toenails are a Gryphea, the part of the mollusk family. So there would have been a little creature living inside. They spent most of the time hiding underneath the seafloor because basically there was just food for everything. But sorry, I've just got to pop up. The Gryphea are very, very common. You can literally go some days and fill your bag up with devil's toenails. They're pretty cool. You know, if you get a nice one, they're nice to collect. And then belemnites, crinoids, ammonites, they're sort of next on the common spectrum. But the reason we get more is because basically there was a lot more of them. They breeded a lot more. There was much more prolific in a shallow water environment.
You said is it a crinoid?
Yeah.
What's that?
So people, when they think of crinoid, they often think of a plant like a sea lily, because they were also known as a sea lily. But there was actually there was animals that went from rock to rock. Sometimes it was in large colonies, and they would have had they had a stalk and a head. And they would have had little feeding arms just drifting in the ocean's currents, feeding off microbes and stuff like that. We actually do have sea lilies still alive today, so they're classed as a living fossil. They're pretty cool. I've got a few in my collection.
Is that so? That's a thing. It looks like a little straw almost, but it's got a star shape. Some of them.
Yeah. So that's one of the species you can get is the star-shaped crinoid. Yeah, that's exactly that. So every single one of them stars you've found or seen, that would have been part of the stalk, segmented stalk, and there would have been hundreds, maybe even thousands, creating the full stalk, leading up to the head of the crinoid.
And then another thing that's quite interesting to sort of see in the stuff that we found is there's quite a big size difference between, if we just take the ammonites, because you get tiny ones, and then you found a massive one not so long ago. Is that one of the biggest ammonites that you've found?
Yeah, no, that was it's up there, but it's not the biggest. If you can see that one there?
I can see there. Yeah.
That's 1, 2, 3, a foot and a half across. That's a huge ammonite from Speeton. The one I found the other day was probably a foot. But you're right, you can get super tiny fossils a couple of millimeters across. And I think the biggest ammonite I've ever seen is is in the Whitby Museum, and it's as big as I am off the ground.
You said these animals, they get quite old. What's the lifespan? If we say they get old, how many years do you reckon they would have lived for?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and one that science hasn't been able to answer, purely because without a time machine, we can't physically go back there and time them. I think it's safe to say that they could have lived 100 years, 80 years. They could have been much shorter. It could have been much longer. But judging by modern day nautiluses, which are classed as living fossils, I think they do estimate it around, them sort of timescales, but we don't know for sure.
I guess it all depends on, what food sources were available as well, because obviously if there's an abundance of food, animals get bigger. If there's a scarcity, they stay small. So it is, exactly. I guess it is difficult, yeah. And
it's also quite interesting when you mention sizes, because in the Ammonite kingdom, there was macroconches and microconches, so the females would have been much larger, the males would have been much smaller.
Is there? Can you tell just from finding an ammonite if it was male or female?
Sometimes on the more common ammonites we find, like the dacks and the Ilders and stuff like that. I think I've got. Yeah, I think I've got an example somewhere behind me where there's an obviously larger ammonite amongst the group, so that was probably the female, and the smaller ones were the males, but there could have as well been the juveniles. So it's not like 100% we know exactly, but we can sort of take an educated guess and say, they were the males, they were the females.
Okay, and tell me, is there something that you've still not found? Is there something on your bucket list that you would like to find, or have you found pretty much everything there is to find on the coast?
No, there's loads. I still haven't found a T-Rex skull.
Is that something that you could find? Yeah.
Well, no, definitely not. So there's some really, really good stuff I'd like to find. So I've got some partial marine reptile and stuff. I'd like to find an ichthyosaur skull. There's a few ammonites I'd like to find. There's a few more crinoids I'd like to find. I would absolutely love to find some dinosaur remains. That'd be like a big moment for me if I found even just a small toe bone. I'd be absolutely thrilled with. So yeah.
Okay.
Dinosaur bone, please.
We'll speak that into the universe, and hopefully next weekend when you go out, you can go and find one. Tell me, have you done any international fossil hunting, or has most of your fossil hunting been on the coastline? Yeah.
Yes, up to now, I'm UK. I've done obviously the Yorkshire coast. I've gone down to Folkestone. I've done Devon. I've done Somerset. I've done Wales. I have got plans to go to the Isle of Wight in February, and I'm going to do a lot more like Scotland, Ireland and stuff like that. And then hopefully, if things carry on going quite well, I will be going to France, Belgium, Germany, Holland, even as far as Italy. There's some sites there. I'd love to go for a trip to Italy. But I suppose the holy grail of fossils for someone like me will be China or America. America's well known for the Badlands. That's where they get the T-Rexes. So I'd love to go spend a week there digging up dinosaur bones. It'll be a lot more difficult for me to go to China because I think there's certain rules and regulations there. But they get some of the fossils that have come out of China are simply the best in the world. The preservation, even like the feathers, are preserved in some of the fossils across there. So I would love to go, international.
The fossils that you find more down south in the UK are they also just mainly marine animals, or?
Yes, on the world famous Jurassic Coast, which is Dorset, so around Charmouth, Lyme Regis, Ike, Burton, Bradstock. It's all marine sediment. What you've got to realise is the country England wasn't England 200 million years ago. It wasn't even where England is. It was basically, so do you know where Morocco is today?
Yeah.
So basically, we've moved from Morocco to where we are now from 200 million years ago. So it would have been the coast of Pangaea, the great supercontinent, would have been roughly around that sort of area. It would have been just off the coast, so, marine environment. And then over 200 million years, that area of the earth has migrated to what we now are as England.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Tell me, if I go out again to go look for fossils, have you got any tips and tricks what I must look for? Because it's obviously just walking around and looking for a specific thing is difficult if you don't know what you're looking for. If there's any tips and tricks that you can give up.
So of course. I mean, I'm all about sharing the knowledge. So what the main thing I say to people when I get asked that question is, do a bit of, you don't have to be a bookworm and stuff like that. You can do a bit of research. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Google, and you can sort of look for fossils that have been found on the Yorkshire coast to give you an idea before you go. I wouldn't advise anyone going just blind. Do a little bit of research. Even join the Facebook groups. There's the Yorkshire Fossil Hunters and stuff like that on Facebook. See what's being found in your local area before you attempt to go out. And then when you do go out, just slow right down. There's no rush. You don't have to be the first person on the beach. You don't have to walk 10 miles, to get the best stuff. Just slow down, really concentrate on looking at all the different types of rocks on the beach. And if you see any signs of any ribbing or a cross section of something you think, well, that looks a bit unnatural or natural, whichever way you look at it, have a really, really good look and just put stuff in your bag. There's no law saying you can't take stuff off the beach. If it's ex situ, i.e. loose on the beach, you're perfectly, in your own rights to take stuff off the beach. You can go with a hammer, and your safety glasses and stuff like that and start splitting rocks if you want. But yeah, my main advice is just to slow right down, really concentrate on looking at the small stuff. Don't just, think you're going to find a 6-foot ammonite, because I've been collecting for years and only found 3 or 4 big ammonites. Most of them are 1 inch, 2 inch in size. And yeah, time on the beach is another great one. If you're not on the beach, you're not going to find a fossil. So go often, go regular. Expect not to find fossils. I go some days and don't find a single thing. People message me all the time calling me golden balls and stuff like that. But I'll be out 3-4 times a week, and sometimes I'm not finding nothing, and then other times I have a really good day. So the main thing is get on the beach, look amongst the rocks, get familiar with the rocks in your area. Research what fossils are in the rocks in your area, and you'll be off to a much better start.
There's obviously times that are better than others to go. I think the last time that we went that we found quite a lot was just after heavy rains. So there was quite a lot of break off from the cliff sides, and I think obviously with the rain and the bad weather that was happening a day or two before we went, the seas were actually also quite rough. So that also helped quite a lot of the breakdown. So you could actually see, because low tides are very low on that piece of Mapleton Beach that we walked. I mean, the sea almost roars back like 100 meters. So there's it's very flat. So there's quite a lot of area to cover. But if you look at sort of the bigger picture, if you stand back and just look where you're supposed to go, you can see a line of, call it sediment or whatever, going down the beach. And it definitely helps if you look at that.
Yeah, so that what you're mentioning, I know straight away that's what we call a boulder field, the boulder clay. So you imagine yourself on Mapleton Beach now and remove all the sand. It's just gone. That's literally all clay underneath you. So the cliffs will drop down, and all underneath the sand is all of that boulder clay. So that one little strip what you just mentioned is where the sand shifted. So a really good day on the Holderness coast is when all the sand's pissed off, basically. Sand's our enemy on the Holderness coast.
I think just also a thing to say is just that people that do go there have to be safe as well. Not to go standing right underneath those cliffs, because those things can fall at any time, man.
Yeah, so there's quite a few important safety factors regarding fossil hunting, and the number one thing I say to people is always check the tide times. You'd be surprised how many people have to get rescued by the RLNI on the Yorkshire coast, especially up north. Some people are just, I don't want to say it's a lack of education. It's probably just they just don't know. You know, it's a tough one because people see these amazing fossils and they want to go find their own, and they make a beeline to the coast and they're all excited. They've got the bag, they've got their hammer, they go with the bed, and before they know it, they're stuck around an headland. The tide's coming in and they're ringing the RLNI. So always check the tide time. I always say to people, collect on a falling tide. So a couple of hours after high tide, it's generally safe to get down on the Yorkshire coast. And if you're not familiar with the area, make sure you're back just after low water. You know, I know the Yorkshire coast at the back of my hand, so there's little snickets I can get down to and stuff like that. But if you're not familiar, make sure you're back just after low water. Always make sure you've got a phone fully charged, got water in your bag, stuff like that. And if you're going on your own, it's really important to let your other half or your friends know exactly where you're going, because if you don't come back and nobody knows where you are.
Yeah, then they know where to look for you, because that is a problem. Because obviously you're just looking down, you're looking at something to find. You don't look up, and you don't look at the tides coming in. So it is a good rule of thumb to just sort of straighten up every once in a while and just look around you.
I can, as daft as it sounds, I can actually hear when the tide is changing. There's a moment of slack water where it almost goes deadly quiet, and then the water, the tone will turn. So I can like hear it now when I know to get off the beach. But it's also important it's a tough one because all the fresh fossils are coming out of the cliffs. So where do you go when you go fossil hunting? You make a beeline for the cliffs. But you've got to remember some of the cliffs on the Yorkshire coast are the highest cliffs in the country. You know, around Bowlby, the 300-400 foot high. That's a lot of rock above you. If a little rock from the top falls down and hits you on your head, you're in big, big trouble. If there's a massive cliff fall, you know, that's it, you're dead. So you've really got to be very, very careful. I don't like to scaremonger people because I want people to go on the coast and find fossils. But you've really got to, you know, use your common sense. If the cliffs look dangerous, if they're creaking and if the rocks are falling, just don't go near the cliffs. On my guided walks, we're never near the cliffs. We're always doing fossil hunting at the low water marks, and we always found plenty of fossils. It's always advisable to go with more than one person just in case anything bad does happen. But there's plenty of information out there online for people to, you know, to make up their own minds on where to go and when to go and that sort of stuff.
While we're on the topic of your guided walks, if you can just tell me a bit more about that. If people want to contact you for a guided walk, what goes into these guided walks? What, if you can just explain that?
Yeah, so basically, it started off with me. I was getting messages on Facebook and WhatsApp and stuff like that. People asking me to take them up fossil hunting. They'd obviously seen some of my posts and thought, you know, this guy knows what he's doing. It makes sure where to find the fossils. And it was once a week, twice a week, and then all of a sudden it was becoming like every week. And my wife was going mad at me because I wasn't earning any money. So I started charging for that privilege, which, you know, is fair enough. So basically now people can go on the website, the yorkshirefossilenhunter.co.uk, and there's a booking form there. They basically just send me a few details regarding the party size, the dates when they want to go. It's very basic stuff to begin with. We'll do a bit of backwards and forwards on the emails until we'll get at a date what we're all happy with and a location. They pay a small deposit. They pay the remainder on the day of the guided walk. We'll meet up on the beach. My walks are private, so say if you booked with me, only people you bring with you are welcome. So there won't be like a big group of 20 people where you're all fighting for a couple of dacks. It's you know, private bookings only. We do a bit of talking about geology. I show them a few fossils. We go off collecting. 99% of the time we get a bag full of fossils because there's only a few of us on the beach. And the odd time where it's been a bit barren, I'll just take them to another location, and we generally always find something. And they've been a massive success. Yeah.
Do you do this any time of year, or is it seasonal? Or
no, this is the beauty about being about doing private walks. I can literally work with anybody at any point. If someone wants to do it, obviously Christmas period and my birthday and stuff like that, I'll have off. But all year long, I'm open for business regarding the guided walks.
And then what's the duration of these walks? Have you got a set time, or is it sort of, I want to go out 6 hours or 2 hours or whatever? So
generally speaking, I limit them to 4 hours, and that's purely because of the tide times on the Yorkshire coast. I won't take any chances on my guided walks. We'll meet a couple of hours after high water, and we'll be off the beach for low water, just pure and simply for health and safety reasons. There's been a few people that have asked for 6-7 hours, and I might creep over that a little bit. But once low waters come, that's it. We're getting off the beach.
Okay, and then you said now that if you don't find anything, you just take them to a different spot.
But we always find something. It's the Yorkshire coast, and I'm the Yorkshire Fossil Hunter. Not being big-headed, we always find something. We always find fossils. There's always something to be found on the Yorkshire coast. Even the fragments and the negatives, and the partials and stuff like that, what the serious collectors won't pick up because they're only after the big good stuff. The majority of my walks are a mum, dad, and a couple of kids who are just going out for a day fossil hunting. They've never done it before. So if I find them half a dark, they're absolutely buzzing with that. It's a little bit of history of their own, and the excitement and joy I see on people's face from finding even fragments is so rewarding for me personally, and it really inspires me to carry on doing these sort of things. So yeah, we always find something.
Is it you obviously get most people just say, listen, I just want to find something and anything. Do you get people coming to you saying, listen, I'm looking for this specific type of thing, and then you go looking for that?
Yeah, that's when I've got to earn my money. So I had a couple from Holland a couple of months ago now, a couple of elderly ladies. They've been involved in museum and fossil in all their life, and they emailed me and said, Mark, we want to come to the Yorkshire coast. We want you to take us out, and we want to find ginkgo plants, very specific ginkgo plants out of all the fossils. So me being me, yeah, that's fine. I know a spot, let's go. I took them to a place I know at Burniston, and within 20 minutes we'd found like half a dozen ginkgo plants. The ironic thing about that story is the amount of times I've been to frigging Burniston to look for ginkgo plants, and I've hardly ever found any. I took these two birds from Holland, and we found half a dozen in 20 minutes. So
where's your, not to give any secrets away, but have you got spots like, if you look for, just argumentative sake, ammonites, you go to Mapleton, and if you look for whatever the next thing is, you go up north. Is there deposits of certain stuff as you go up and down the coastline?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to really reiterate this point. There's no secret about it. It's all about doing your research and time on the beach. So the Holderness coast, as we mentioned before, is all glacial erratic. So it's a real it's almost like a washing machine effect of anything and everything from all over the place. As far as Scandinavia, Norway and stuff like that, stuff has been brought down to the Holderness coast. So the Holderness coast is it's like a lucky dip. You can find weird and wonderful things on the Holderness coast. When you start going up north, where the bedrock is, the Jurassic formations, you know what you're going to find because there's only certain types of fossils within them bedrocks. So you can go find Dactylioceras if you know where the Dac beds are. You can go find Hildoceras if you know where the Hildy beds are. And I've pretty much got them all sussed out now where I know if somebody wanted a particular species, I could take them to a certain area and find it. There's a few examples like the really rare ammonites, the Horgias and the Fruchellas and stuff like that, where I could take them where they're meant to be, but we probably won't find one because I've only found one of them in all my years of collecting. So I do get the odd person saying, I want one of these, but it's a case of reality is you're not probably going to find one. If people approach me and ask me, I will give them information where to go. There's a few spots on the Yorkshire coast I won't tell people about, and that's not from a point of view where I want it to myself. It's purely because some of the access is quite risky. There's a few areas where we do a bit of rope climbing down and stuff like that, and there's no way I'm going to tell someone I don't know to go down a rope in the middle of winter, because if they have an accident, it's on my conscience a bit.
What are the rules of picking stuff up? Anything? How does it work? Because we weren't sure when we went down if we were allowed to just go pick up stuff. How does that work?
Basically, everything you found, you'll have to hand in to me in the next 24 hours. If it's ex situ, if it's out of the bedrock, you are allowed to take it. You're allowed to collect it. If it's loose on the beach, you're allowed to take it. There'll be a couple of little grey areas amongst that, but generally speaking, the general vibe is if it's loose, you can take it. If it's loose and I don't want to say new species because new species is likely not going to happen, but if it's scientifically important, you've got a bit of a moral obligation to let a museum at least look at it. You don't have to donate it, you don't have to sell it, you don't have to do anything, but if science can be improved from what you found, I'd strongly advise you at least let them look at it. If it's in situ, i.e. if you go to Whitby and you're on the Whitby mudstones on the shale members and you see a big ammonite or a big ichthyosaur or any fossil and it's in the bedrock, you aren't allowed to take it. Most of these places are triple SI sites, which is a place of scientific importance, which is a bit of a grey area in itself because there's been no scientists on the beach in bloody years. But that's for another day. So yeah, if it's in situ, you're not meant to be cutting them out. You're not meant to be removing them. You're meant to be reporting them to the relevant authorities, the museums and stuff like that, and they'll maybe come and take it out if they've got time or if they've got the budget.
Okay, so basically, if you can pick it up and put it in your pocket, you're fine to do that.
Basically, yeah. And if you do see something in situ, what you think's, well, that really needs to be, revealed. You can. There's people you can get in touch with. There's museums in Whitby and stuff like that. It really is a tough one, and I don't want to say too much about it because I'm on the shelf. Well, I'm on the fence with it. The likelihood is they won't come to the beach and remove it because they haven't got the staff, they haven't got the funding, so it'll just be left to be destroyed by the sea. There is some collectors that will go and remove it. It might not be legal, but they'll do it just to preserve the fossil. Sometimes that fossil ends up on the black market and sold to Timbuktu for £1 million. That's the shady side of fossil hunting. I don't blame them. I'm not against it. I'm not, for it. I sort of stay neutral on that side of things. I think it's important fossils preserved. That's what I think.
You said that if it is scientifically significant that you should rather than not take it home, but how would a person like me that's got no proper knowledge of these things, how would I know what's new and what's old or what hasn't been discovered yet?
That's a really good question because, I mean, as you can imagine, my messenger pings quite a bit with new collectors, and everything that a new collector found is scientifically important.
Yeah,
it's a tough one. The main thing is, if you found something, put it out there. Join the Facebook groups. There's plenty of knowledgeable people on there. Share your pictures. You'll still find out if it's important or not. The reality is, 99.9% of everything what's being found is not scientifically important. The museums have got thousands of these specimens, even the rare specimens. I can't remember the last time there was actually a new species found on the Yorkshire coast. There probably was, and I hadn't heard about it. But yeah, the harsh reality is it's going to be really important to you or whoever's found it, but it's not going to be scientifically important. But there is always that chance you could find something which is scientifically important. So yeah, share it on Facebook, share it with your local museum, anybody who you know is into fossils, share it with them sort of people.
That is, I think, one of the nicest things for me is posting a picture on one of those groups. You get so many people that give you an answer back to a question within minutes, and they tell you exactly. They'll tell you exactly what it is, where it comes from, what time period it comes from, and it gives you a lot of information on what you've got, which is nice. Because I come home and I try and Google this stuff, and it's difficult to type what you have into Google, because what the hell do I type in spiral shell looking fossil or whatever? But if I put it on the group, it's 4 minutes, and some other guy that knows his shit will comment there and say this is this, and it makes it so much more fun.
I always say Google's brilliant if you want to know how long to boil an egg, or if you want to know how to put a shelf up. But you ask it a question about a fossil you found on the Holderness coast or something, it won't have a clue unless you know specifically what you're asking. Facebook is such a brilliant, tool for this sort of thing. This is the main reason I use Facebook. I don't really have a private life on Facebook. I don't share what I had for breakfast or, that side of things. I use it predominantly for my hobby and for my business. It's all fossil hunting. And you're right in what you just said. There's some amazing, far more knowledgeable people than me on Facebook who know a lot more, the finer details of, like I mentioned the Jurassic earlier on. Within the Jurassic, there's like little subzones of time as well, and it starts getting quite technical. But there's people on Facebook that know these off by heart. So yeah, Facebook's brilliant. If you found something you're not sure about, put it on Facebook. You might get a little bit of debate amongst a few of the academics where one will say it's this and another will say it's that. But generally it all sort of gets levelled out, and it's really, really helpful. Even I go on Facebook sometimes and say, I found this. Has anybody got a clue what it is? So as much as I know, I don't know it all. We're always learning, and I'm definitely always learning something new every day. And it's through Facebook what has helped that.
On these, Mark, on these walks of yours, what kit do people need to go out? Do you give people sort of the minimum stuff, or do I need to buy some hammers and goggles and stuff beforehand?
So one thing I do advise is people don't need to bring hammers and chisels. They can if they want, but the majority of the fossils we find on the guided walks are through our eyes only. There's a lot of the fossils anybody finds is just through your eyes. If there's anything that needs hammering and chiseling, I'll do that on the beach, in a safe manner. Sometimes I let the kids have a go. I'll put the glasses on them and we'll split. Just for example, like a little nodule like this. This one's already been split, but I'll split this with the kids on the beach, and it's always a nice little, experience for them. The main thing is,
if you just want to hold that up quickly, because that's a good sort of thing to look for, because anyone will just walk past that and it just looks like a rock. But if you look for those little lines on the side, you can sort of see, and that shape as well.
The shape is really, really important. So I often refer to these as like a donut, fat in the middle, thinner on the outside. And I don't know if you can see, but there's obviously, ignore this crack because that's happened after we split it. But there's a little bit of rub in there. That's a really good sign. These are quite common up Whitby way, these little nodules. And if you're lucky, you split them, and inside there's a beautiful little ammonite. But yeah, I do say to people, make sure you've got adequate footwear. Really important to wear decent footwear on the beach. It's quite slippery in places. You need a bag to carry your fossils, because I am carrying your fossils for you. Waterproofs and stuff like that is really important, and plenty of water and snacks and stuff.
So you do part of your business is the fossil prep, and you do not classes. What do you call it? Like
Preparation
lessons.
Lessons.
Take me through what's the process from picking up a rock like the one that you showed now. What's the process from getting that rock in your hands to having a full fossil in your hand? How does that work?
So yeah, that's quite a good question. So obviously the fossils I've shown you a while ago, they were already prepared. And quite a common question I get, especially when people come to my display room, is, God, it's amazing you found fossils like this on the beach. And the reality is, we're frigging dirt. There's a lot of work that goes into revealing the fossils inside the host rocks. So most of the fossils we find are in like a round nodule, shorter shape. There'll be a little bit of ribbing we see, or a little bit of a cross section, which will give us an indicator that there's a fossil inside. And through experience now, I generally know which ones are worth taking and which ones are not, or which ones are worth splitting on the beach. But if I know there's something good, I will take it home. And I've got a purpose-built workshop just for fossil preparation. I've got various amounts of pneumatic pens and grinders. And if you think the pen it's basically like a mini jackhammer, but pen-shaped, pen-sized. So it'll it'll be pneumatic, and it'll remove really small amounts of rock. And you basically, it's like reverse carving, if you kind of get my drift. You're removing the rock and hoping that the rock separates from the fossil inside without damaging the fossil inside. The process can take 20 minutes on a small little DAC. To some of the fossils I've prepped have took hundreds and hundreds of hours. But yeah, you're basically removing the rock little bit at a time, slowly revealing the fossil. There's a lot more techniques to it than I'm letting on there, but that's the basic of it.
How did you sort of get into doing that? Did you get taught that by someone, or did you just watch YouTube videos, or how did you get into it?
No, I'm a modern day man. YouTube is our, it's like my Bible nowadays. We all love YouTube. But so I've got a good friend, Chris Cohn, Chris Cohn and John Cohn are two people I thought I'd like to mention because they really did get me into fossil hunting full time. So yeah, I've got them to blame really. But Chris is a fantastic preparator, and he taught me a lot. So when I first started finding fossils, I was sending them off to people for fossil preparation, and I was getting like £200-300 bills every time. Being an old lad,
Oh.
I don't like that. I like to keep my money in my pocket. So I invested. I bought some tools. My friend Chris came around and gave me some pointers. And I think working in construction and engineering, I've always been good with my hands. I've always been good with tools and stuff like that. I took to it quite well. And within a couple of months, I was, quite competent at preparing my own fossils. So yeah, from then on, I just carried on prepping. And then I built a workshop purposely built for preparing fossils. I've got all the tools and the extraction and the compressors and all that sort of stuff. And that was basically 10 years ago now. I started doing all that.
Is it quite an expensive thing to get into? If a person like me, obviously I'm not going to go build a workshop and stuff like you have, but is there a cheap way to get into processing fossils and doing that just at home?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a company called Zoic Paleotech who I get all my tools off. They're absolutely fantastic for fossil preparation. And what they're really good at is catering for the complete beginners to people like myself who do it for a living. So they sell a tool called it's a Dremel engraver basically, but they've modified it for fossil preparation. So people will buy the Dremel from Aldi or from Amazon, and it comes with a cheap little mild steel tips and the break within 5 minutes. So if you want to start doing fossil preparation, I recommend you get one of these kits from Zoic. It comes with tungsten tips. I think they're about 50 quid, something like that. You don't need a workshop. If you've got a shed, or have you got an outbuilding or something like that, go set up in there. As long as you've got the RPE on, I recommend you wear decent dust mask because there's some silica dust involved with fossil preparation, which you really don't want to breathe in because of your lungs. So yeah, you can spend from as little as 50 quid on a cheap tool, and it'll get you going. And then I've spent thousands on my kit. But what I always say to people when people say, oh, you spent thousands of pounds on fossil preparation. I've got a friend who's an electrician. He's got 20 grand's worth of tools in his van. Do you know?
Yeah.
You do video blogging or you know this sort of stuff. I bet your setup cost a lot more than my setup. You know, your microphone, your headphones. It's all tools of the trade, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. Tell me, is it safe to just pick up random rocks and open them up? Is there not a risk of fucking opening up a rock and releasing some other prehistoric crits that will go into your lungs and turn you into a fucking dinosaur zombie?
I liked this question. These are the sort of questions I like because we don't know. You know, who's to say yes, who's to say no? I imagine there'll be some sort of it's very hard to imagine there will be a dangerous plague like, you know, virus coming out because it's a rock and it's fossilized. All the soft parts are likely 99.9% of it is all long gone. But it's not impossible, is it? I think there's been a few cases of finding fossils in the permafrost, you know, Siberia, Russia, where the preservation's really, really good. I think they've even extracted blood and, you know, DNA from some of the woolly mammoths. I imagine there's a very real possibility of some ancient disease being spread that way, but probably not on the Yorkshire coast. But I think I'll answer that one saying we don't know. It's quite possible.
Okay, so yeah, just wear your mask and your goggles, and if you find some other alien still living in a rock, just let the proper guys know.
One thing I do find a lot on the beach, especially when I'm hitting my rocks, is you'll get a really strong smell of diesel, petrol in some of the rocks, and even sometimes you'll get it's almost like a greeny, illuminated liquid coming out of the rock, and it's basically raw fossil fuel, you know, in all senses. That's what it is. It literally stinks like you're on a diesel forecourt. It hums of petrol. So there is some liquid in there. So you never know.
Tell me now, you've obviously got a shop. Is your shop here in Hull?
Well, it's an online shop. When people come to my display room, I have got fossils on the shelves for sale, you know, over that side over there. But it's not a physical shop people can come to unless they want it to by special request.
Okay, so but I can, like, if you do your guided walks, if there's some very cool fossils that you find, you can do the prep for the people and sort of make them look pretty, and then that's
often what happens is we'll go out for a day's collecting, and at the end of the day we'll have a good roundup. We'll see what's been found, and I'll advise if there's any what needs preparing or not. Normally they want a couple preparing, you know, for the kids as a bit of a souvenir and stuff like that. So yeah, I often take fossils away, prepare them, and then send them back in the post to the customers.
The fossils that are in your showroom, were they all found by you, or do you buy in fossils?
So the majority of the fossils in my display room were found by myself. There's a couple of fossils what have been bought as a present by the wife and the kids for Father's Day and stuff like that. But pretty much everything behind me was found by myself, apart from the tusk and the tooth. There's the majority of fossils to the right of me, was all found and prepared by myself. There's a big wall, what you can't see, which is like I class that as my international section. There's a lot of fossils from America, Russia, China, Morocco, and even like down south from Dorset and stuff. I've bought a lot of them, obviously, because I haven't been abroad yet. But I'd say a good 80% of the fossils in here are what I found and prepared myself.
And then this might be a bit of a shitty question, but the fossils in your shop that are available online, how do you put a price on something like that? Is it man hours that goes into the prep to get it looking like that, or how do you determine a price?
Well, there's quite a few people selling fossils, so I'll do a little bit of, I suppose they call it market research. I'll have a look a similar sort of fossils going for. But generally speaking, if I find an ammonite, what I've got 10 of in my collection, what I don't need, I will prepare it, and if it takes me an hour to prepare, then that's a certain amount of money in fossil preparation. I'll then add a little bit on for the finding of the fossil, and generally my prices are pretty reflective of other fossils in the what are for sale at other sites. But yeah, a lot of the money in fossils is, I say that as if there's loads of money in fossils. I'm not a millionaire. It'd be nice if I was. But a lot of the prices in fossils reflects the time spent preparing the fossils. So if you have a look on my website, I've got fossils from as little as £10, which took me 10-20 minutes to prepare, and then I've got fossils for like 500-600 quid, which took me hours and hours and hours to prepare. So it's all really is time dependent, and also rarity. If it's a really, really rare fossil, people will pay more for that. But then if it's a really, really rare fossil what I found, I won't be selling it. It'll be going in my collection.
I just want to talk a bit more about the prep of things. Do you just open them up and sort of get the rock away from the thing, or do you polish them? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a few different, there's quite a lot of different options really. If I find a rock on the beach and I can't see any obvious signs, I'll give it a tap with my hammer, and then if I break a bit of the rock away and I see a fossil inside, that's it. I'll leave it. I'll bring it home for prepping. Sometimes you really need to bray a rock to see what's inside. So if it's a complete fossil of an ammonite, a vertebrate, whatever, if I know it's complete, I'll be prepping it. If it's a fragment like of an ammonite, I think you can actually see. Can you see this black shiny one behind me? So that is a big fragment of an ammonite, but it's not complete. So I cut it right down the middle, and it's revealed a beautiful black calcite of the chambers inside. So some fossils do tend to lean towards being cut and polished, with the saw and the flat lap and stuff like that. And then other fossils lean towards being prepared. It's much better to prepare a fossil, if it's complete. You won't want to destroy a fossil by cutting and polishing it. But if there's no other use for a fossil, if it's a fragment or it's really squashed, or even like really pyritic where it's not going to prep well, the last case of is to cut and polish it, where at least you get some out of the fossil.
Do you most of the stuff that we've talked about? It's animals with shells.
Yeah.
Have you ever found like fish? More animally stuff than what we think of just stuff in shells.
You've got to remember the Yorkshire coast is marine deposits, so it's all from the sea. So there's been some incredible fish specimens found. I've only found a few bits and bobs of fish, but in some of the museums you see, like I recently visited the Steve Etch's collection down south in Cambridge, and he's got some fantastic fish. Fish as big as like a metre long, even bigger some of them, like ancient sturgeon and gyrostasis and stuff like that. So there is some incredible fish to be found. Animals, land animals, it's just the wrong sort of rock for that on Yorkshire. It's all marine sediment. There's a little bit in between around Scarborough where it was a bit of a river environment, so there is a possibility of finding dinosaur bones and even turtles and stuff like that, but it's very, very rare. You need to be going to other geological locations if you want to find land animals. America's a prime example. You go to the Badlands and you're digging up T-Rexes and various different dinosaurs and stuff like that. So it's all about your locality and knowing your geology and knowing what existed in that sort of geology whenever that timescale was from.
Mark, have you got any more interesting fossils there by your side that you can show us and tell us a bit more about?
I've got a couple. So this is a. Do you know what that is? Just by looking at it.
I would say that's a piece of wood.
That is exactly that's a piece of wood. So this is what's known as jet. it's likely from the monkey puzzle tree, although there's a little bit of debate out on that at the moment. You can see, if you look closely, you can see the grain of the wood. You can even see there's a bit of a knot there. So this is formed under some really, really big pressure in the Whitby mudstones, and it's basically like a precious stone now. People make jewellery out of it. They make various brooches and stuff like that. But a piece like this with the wood effect still on is not going to be turned into jewellery while I'm alive, that's for sure. Because this is a brilliant example.
So will that will be a piece of fossilized wood? That wouldn't be like the octopus type stuff that we spoke about. That was basically just the memory of a fossil. That is the actual piece of wood.
So to my knowledge, that is the actual piece of wood. It's just been under a serious amount of pressure and over millions of years. I think that's I think that's classed as carbonisation fossil, where it's basically carbonised and turned into what we call as jet now.
How old do you reckon that piece is?
It's from the Jurassic, because it was found at Whitby in and amongst the Jurassic limestones. Excuse me. So yeah, it's likely lower Jurassic in age, like 180 million years, something like that. And then we've got an interesting one here. So this is a really well sought after fossil from the Holderness coast. These are called Arnie blocks, and like what I mentioned earlier on about the cross sections, can you see this? So that's basically an ammonite what's worn away, and you can see it's absolutely full of ammonites inside this rock. And when I hadn't done anything to this apart from hitting it with a hammer. You can see all the ammonites inside. It's absolutely hundreds and thousands. So these are all Arniosaurus ammonites. And these are quite commonly found on the Holderness coast. Just as big slabs like this.
So with a big lot of fossils in a group like that, do you reckon that they all die off at the same time, or were they sort of, because of turbulent seas, covered up quickly and they all just died in the same place?
So yeah, I think that's exactly what happened in that case. There would have been a big shoal of them, if that's what they call a shoal of ammonites. There'd have been thousands of them in one sort of environment. Some high energy environment would have happened, like a tsunami or a rough storm or something like that, and it would have killed a load of ammonites all at the same time. They would have been quickly covered in sediment because of the high energy environment, and then, like we spoke out earlier on, they've been fossilised. So it's quite weird, because when we find fossils in large groups, they do tend to be all the same sort of species. Every now and then we'll get a rare block where there's a few different species inside, which is like pretty cool. But yeah, like in that case, there's just thousands of Arniosaurus altogether.
What did these animals look like? Were they basically like a snail, where we know like it's got a foot and you've got the spiral shell at the top, or what did they look like?
So I think there's been a few soft body parts found, but not many. So they're not 100% sure on exactly what they looked like, but there would have been probably a bit squid-like, a bit cephalopod-like. They would have had tentacles. So let me pick this fossil up. So there would have been in the living chamber there would have been the soft body parts of the creature, and then the tentacles would have come out for like the feeding arms and stuff like that. So they would have very likely had tentacles, and rather than like a snail.
Okay, so it would be so it would be more like an octopus and less like a snail.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And do we find any? Sorry, to say that again.
Like a modern day nautilus, it would have been not too dissimilar from that. They wouldn't have been the same because it is a different species, but they would have had a soft body part, and they would have had tentacles coming out of the mouth opening.
And do we find crab-like stuff over here?
Yeah, so we'll get crustaceans on the Yorkshire coast as well. Again, it's not something I've found too much of, because they're only found in a couple of localities. I don't often go looking for them because they don't float my boat very much. But we get crustaceans like lobster, shrimp. I think there has been a few crabs and a few rarer fossils, rarer crustaceans found. There's been like some vampire squid and stuff like that, which are pretty cool. But they generally are very, very small, generally quite fragmentized and stuff like that. But yeah, we do get crustaceans.
And while these animals were still alive, were they deep sea stuff, or was it animals that would knock around sort of close to the coastline?
So yeah, the crustaceans would have definitely been like a shallow marine environment. There is ammonites we know lived in the deep sea. Like when you got Whitby, it's a lot more deep sea environment. So the nautiluses and the phalosaurs and stuff like that, they're often found in the deep sea environment, sedimentary rocks. But there is fossils that lived close to the sea, close to the coastline. Sorry, where we get a lot of shells. We know that was quite a shallow marine environment. There is some evidence of ammonites living close to the coastline as well. But yeah, regarding crustaceans, I'd imagine like today's crustaceans, they live very close to the coastline.
Okay. Yeah, I could continue this for hours. This is very interesting.
Yeah. There's a few more fossils.
Yeah, go for it.
So this one's pretty cool. So I was with, like I mentioned, my friend John Kozer earlier on. We was actually on the beach together. It was absolutely pissing it down. It wasn't a very enjoyable day until I hit a rock and found that. So it's a big Amaltheus Stokesy, and this is a good example of. So we've got the large female ammonite here, and then we've got a couple of small ammonites, which are likely male, or they could be juvenile females. It's quite hard to say, but I mean that's a pretty stonking ammonite off the Yorkshire coast. They don't really get much better than that.
So are these animals that would have laid eggs, or how did they reproduce?
Definitely eggs. And when you said earlier on about a fossil, what I'd like to find, one of them is fossilized eggs. So when I mentioned the Steve Etches collection, something he's really, really well known for at the moment is he's actually found some fossilized eggs from ammonites. They're exactly like you imagine, really, really tiny cluster of eggs. Pretty similar to, have you seen a salmon spawning when all the eggs are released? Very similar to that sort of shape. And yeah, so they lay eggs.
There's one other thing that I want to ask you about. I don't know if you have them there with you. We found a few rocks that have got thousands of little, looks like straws within them, that I'm guessing was like just a piece of coral.
There's a few things that sort of jumps out to me when you say the lake straws. There's a few shells, what look like long lines in a rock, and when the rock's weathered down and you see in the cross section, so it could be some type of shells, or it could be corals. I have got. Let me just grab some. 1 second.
I think at this point, anyone that's just listening, stop and go to YouTube and go actually look at this, because it's amazing to see the wall behind Mark with all this stuff he's found. And it's amazing. It still is amazing for me to think that those things were crawling around fucking millions of years ago.
And this is only, I've got 4 walls in here which are full of rocks like this. So this is, I don't know, can you see the polyps on that?
I could see there's a little, I could see the dot there.
I'll just wet it. Does that look a bit better for you? Is that what you meant?
Yes, there we go. That was what I was talking about, yeah.
So this is a coral colony, very similar to today's corals that would have lived in colonies or singularities. This is one I cut and polished, so inside you can see all the individual polyps.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then you get different types of corals. So this one has got slightly larger polyps, as you can see. But these are quite cool because they cut and polish really, really well. These are often quite popular.
What else have you got there? What else can you show us? I'm loving this now.
So this is an Arnie block that was found and prepared, very similar to like what I just showed you. You see the cross sections, but this one's been fully prepared.
Oh, wow.
So that's pretty spectacular, isn't it, with the 3D preservation and the calcite preservation, which is, you see the lightly coloured variations. That's a type of
But
calcite.
this is obviously, I mean, this doesn't look like that. You have to physically dig out the pieces of rock in between
This
them.
was fully covered in sediment, and there would have been even more ammonites on top, what weren't as well preserved. So we've literally penned into all of these nooks and crannies, very, very careful, methodical, slow work, and even finished it off with, there's a technique called air abrasion, which is pretty similar to sandblasting, but on a much more micro level with much finer materials like dolomite and aluminium oxide and stuff like that. So yeah.
So is the fossil harder or more tough or whatever than the rock surrounding it?
So that's a good question, because in some instances the fossil is softer than the host rock, and then in other instances the host rock is softer than the fossil. So you've really got to know your locality. You've got to know what sort of rocks you're dealing with, especially when you get involved with fossil preparation. So you know how best to approach it, with what tools, with what methods and stuff like that. It's not too bad if you're preparing fossils for yourself. But if you start doing it for other people and they send you a fossil and you go in there with the wrong technique and you can only destroy a fossil once, that's it. Once you pen through it, you pen through it. So yeah, you've got to look at the rock before you start prepping.
Is there a massive, if we, for argument's sake, just talk about ammonites, is there a massive difference in composition of these ammonites, or are they normally made up of 5 or 6 different things, or is there a very wide variety of sort of what they can look like? And
so when you say composition, you mean what they're made of in fossil preparation, or what they look like on the exterior regarding their appearance?
Well, if like what they look like, because obviously, as we said earlier, the ammonites, that is the physical shell of the animal. It's not like the octopusy stuff, which is sort of the elements surrounding it. On the coastline here, is there like 5 different types of, not species of ammonite, but 5 different sort of types of what they look like? This is a very vague question. I'm sorry, but I don't know enough about it to ask it better.
I know exactly what you mean. So the average person, an ammonite looks like an ammonite, but to fossil geeks like me, we can tell just by the ribbing, by the keel, by slight little subtle variations between species and species. So there's thousands of different types of species of ammonites across the world, and you've really got to start looking at them on even sometimes it's how many ribs on a whale determines which sort of species it is. So just for example, I've got there's 2 Dactylioceras ammonites here, so they're both Dactylioceras, but you can see the ribbing on this one is much more closer together than the ribbing on this one. So this is a Dactylioceras semicollatum, and this is a Dactylioceras commune, I think. And just within the Dactylioceras family, there's a dozen or so different species. This is just 2 of them. There's several more types of dacs.
Would those two have been living in the same time period, or have they got millions of years between them?
So this is an example of evolution. I can't remember off the top of my head which one came first. I think it was a semicollatum, but I'll probably be wrong on that. It's a 50-50 shot. So yeah, one was before the other.
Okay, what's the oldest thing that you've got there?
Good question. I haven't got anything from the Triassic, which would be pretty cool. Yeah, I don't.
Because I mean, if we do, I mean, we've spoken about the age difference. I mean, 100 million years is quite a big difference in time.
Yeah, I'd think some of the oldest fossils I've got are probably from around Whitby way, the lower Jurassic. You know, you could be talking up to 200 million years old. There might be a surprise in my international section which I don't know about. There could well be fossils from the Triassic over there. I haven't done the research on it because it's found in Morocco or Madagascar, and it's not really relevant to me. But yeah, let's just say 200 million years old is the oldest fossil I've got for now.
And then when you, for argument's sake, open up a 200 million year old ammonite and you prep it, you make it look beautiful.
Yeah.
Will that stay like that forever, or do you have to sort of cover it in a type of resin or something to keep it that way, or will it break down because it's not captured in that rock anymore?
Yeah, so with the ammonites, they're fairly quite stable. You can give them a coat of beeswax or even like a diluted artist varnish. That's generally just to bring the colours out of the shell. They look a bit better on the shelf when they've had a coating. I'll give them a stiff brush with a hog hair brush or something like that every 6 months or something, just to make them a little bit shiny again. I try not to make them too shiny, like a satin finish is quite nice. So yeah, with the hard-bodied, hard shelled stuff, they're generally quite stable. It's a rock at the end of the day. It's not going to go anywhere unless you left it outside in the rain. Bone can be quite fragile, so with bone we've really got to consolidate it a lot during preparation, and we'll use like a paraloid solution, so constantly putting paraloid in the bone, which strengthens it and makes it a lot more durable, especially during the preparation process. And then when the work's complete, you'll give it a final paraloid, and generally speaking, it's all right. The more fragile fossils are like the ones that are septic to pyrite rot and stuff like that. So yeah, there's some instances where pyrite can actually form a disease, and it'll literally turn the fossil into dust, but within a space of a couple of days or a couple of weeks. So you've got to keep an eye on fossils you're collecting. If they've got pyrite, you don't generally take them home as much as the other fossils.
Okay, no, that's bloody interesting.
Also,
Mark, thank you very much.
There's also some shale fossils as well, what are very, very fragile.
Up
Whitby,
what's that?
In the Whitby mudstones, in the big shelves, it's all full of shale, and it's quite stable on the beach when it's wet, but when you take it off the beach and it dries out, it can be very, very fragile.
Okay. Yeah, so there's I think that's what's quite interesting about finding these stuff, is you get so many different types, and depending on what they are in, locked up or whatever, it's there's an amazing sort of range of stuff that you can find.
It's all a really big learning curve, and there's so much variation, especially on the Yorkshire coast. We really are spoilt for choice. But before you go, there's one big fossil I've got to show you. You can't do a podcast without seeing this. So what does that look like?
That I'd go and say that must be like a jaw of something with some teeth.
Exactly that. So these teeth, they're as big as my fingers. So this is actually a jaw section off a Temnodontosaurus, which is the largest type of ichthyosaur that ever lived. And the UK leading, I'm going to put it down because it's really fucking heavy, but so that
would have been like those dolphin type things that you spoke about.
That. But this one would have been 20, 30 foot in length. It would have been absolutely massive. You've got to think that jaw section is what, like a foot long. That's only a small part of the full skull. The skull would have been 1 meter or 2 in length. And actually the leading UK paleontologist, Dr. Dean Lomax, commented on it, saying it's the best preserved Temnodontosaurus jaw section that's ever been found on the Yorkshire coast, in the last couple of 100 years. So that made the worldwide news. It was New York Times and stuff all got involved on that, and that was a really good find.
Did you find that yourself?
I didn't actually find that on myself. My friend Phil found it, but he donated it to me instantly because he knew I'd appreciate it a lot more. I prepared the fossil, and it's been in here ever since.
Was that so? That was also like in a rock. You didn't find it,
Yes,
or he didn't find it like that.
Yeah, was the full rock where I've exposed the teeth and the jaw section. That was covered with rock. It was basically just a round rock. And what he saw was, well, it's actually a bit of a funny. He'll probably slap me for saying this. He was quite new to fossil hunting when he found it, so he thought it was coral and belemnites, which is, you know, a simple enough thing in itself. So he hit it with an hammer several times, breaking the jaw and breaking some of the teeth, which is, you know. So I think that's the main reason he gave it to me, was because he felt like such a nit braying it on the beach. But since then he's become a fantastic fossil hunter and he's found some amazing stuff. But yeah, he donated that to me. I stuck it back together, I prepared it, I restored it. It took me 130 hours to finish that fossil. So, you know, like what we said about putting value on fossils, you've got to think 130 hours plus the rarity. That's a really, really expensive fossil right there.
I think that brings us back to, if you find something that you think might be a lot more cooler than what you think it is, maybe don't hit it with a hammer and open it up. Maybe just contact someone like you to properly open it up.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Even if it ends up being something as common as a really common ammonite, if you're not sure, you know, ask a few people, get in touch with me. I'm always at the end of my emails and stuff like that, or join a Facebook group and ask the question. There's been quite a lot of instances where, because fossil hunting is getting so popular now, there's literally hundreds of people joining it all the time. We get quite a lot of broken fossils, which would have been really nice fossils, you know, if they would have been not hit with a hammer. I'm not saying don't go up there and hit rocks, because one of the key bits of learning is looking inside a rock, and you're not going to, you know, see what's inside the rock without hitting it. But you've just hit the nail on the head. If you think there's something inside what could be prepared, then you are probably better off at least getting an opinion on it, you know, before you want to spend some money on it.
While we're on that note, Mark, where can people find you? Where can they visit your shop? All of that.
So yeah, the YorkshireFossilHunter.co.uk or the YorkshireFossilHunter.com. That's my website. Everything you need to know about me is on there. My shop, my preparation services, my preparation lessons, my guided walks. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Again, the Yorkshire Fossil Hunter. That's what I'm known of across all the platforms.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll put all of that in the description so people can just click on it. But Mark, thank you very much. Thanks for spending a bit of time with me, and this has been very interesting. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Okay, but yeah, I'll definitely be in contact. I think I need to do one of those guided walks. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, no worries, buddy. No worries whatsoever.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. I'll talk to you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, bud.